Okay, so you're going full steam into Uber at the time. Is your first project launching Uber Chicago?
Yeah, so then it was basically the next day. It was Alan and I in a co-working space, box of iPhones, yellow pages, calling drivers, getting drivers in the office, basically telling people what a smartphone is.
Awesome. Keep going,
Because
dude. Tell us about this process. So what I want to know, and I think people want to know this. Two things. I'd love for you to, while you're going through telling this story, talking about the specifics of what you're doing, like yellow pages or box of iPhones, like get down to the specifics and bring us to the place where you were. But launching new markets is one of the things that I want to talk about, because one of Uber's superpowers is like launching new markets and doing it really, really well through adversity, all odds, and having it be extremely successful. So when you're launching Uber Chicago, tell us about that process. Walk us through each phase of launching Uber Chicago as you would, launching a market. And then we could talk about, marketing, PR, biz dev, and social media as you were owning those things.
yeah, I mean, it was really simple. So at the time Uber was in San Francisco, New York had launched in April. So San Francisco was summer 2010. New York was like April 2011, and then we were August 11 along with Seattle, and then Seattle actually launched in August. We did a soft launch in August, and we officially launched like September 20th. And I mean, Alan and I were basically the first two employees in the field. And Austin Geit, who's like the most amazing person ever, she was like the first intern at Uber. She had just done every job and then flew to Seattle to launch that market. So it was basically Alan and I, and then Brian Graves was helping us get Chicago going. So sort of simultaneously, it was sort of the first time Uber started to build like the launch muscle. And
Right.
yeah, I mean, it was as simple as you get a couple of drivers on the road. So at that time, you sort of incentivize supply to be on the road. In order to have a two-sided marketplace, you've got to start with supply. You have to have supply. The only way you can ever have demand is if you have a thing to sell. We would start by getting drivers on the road, giving them, sort of a minimum such that they would be on the road for the hours that we needed them out there, and, incentives to make sure they were accepting dispatches and such. And so, yeah, it was literally, basically a week later, Ryan Allen and I were in a co-working space conference room at midnight, and he called one of his buddies to take the ride the next morning. And we sent out a email to the, probably 300 people that we had signed up in Chicago at that time, and said secret Ubers are on the road tomorrow. And the next morning we had the first ride. It was Tom Conrad, who at the time was like the CTO of Pandora. So random. It was no offense to Tom, but the most random Rider Zero. We did a cool thing when we launched the city, which you had someone cool and interesting from that city be Rider Zero.
That's smart.
But Chicago, we just hadn't done it. No one had we just didn't really have a list, like a launch plan yet. So last minute, Graves was like, "Oh, my buddy's in town tomorrow. We'll just have him do it." He had no affiliations to Chicago. I have no idea why he was even there. But so, whatever. So he was the first dude to take a ride, first person to take a ride, and then it was off. And so you would email a few hundred people, and one ride happens, and then an hour later the second ride happens, and then the system kind of starts to work. And so it was black car only, $15 minimum fare, and it was about 2 times what a taxi costs. So it wasn't cheap, but it was still awesome. It was reliable. Pretty much 5-10 minutes, press a button, car pulls up, you can watch it as it approaches, and drivers were great. Open the door, high-end experience, and you only pay for as far as you go. So that was kind of the deal. And we did that for 4 weeks, and then we did an official launch. We were very secretive or whatever, so it was like secret Ubers for 4 weeks. It was a beta period, which was also kind of a unique sort of Uber innovation, which was basically like taking the idea of a software beta to the real world.
Yeah, online offline exclusivity with the beta. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's something that other brands and such could definitely do, which is just you're just setting expectations, right? It's like, we're not ready for prime time, but this thing's in beta. And, we did that for 4 weeks, and was great. We did another launch September 20th and invited a bunch of cool influencer type people and local entrepreneurs and whatnot to a dinner. Travis gave a really awesome presentation. Garrett Camp was there, the other co-founder, Graves, obviously, Alan and I, and and then did some press that day, and then we've got a market live. So then it shifted into, all right, starting to build supply and demand in the market.
So tell us. So okay, so you do the actual launch in September. You have the influencers in that dinner, and then does the market just kind of take care of itself after that from an Uber perspective?
You're doing things to incentivize supply to be on the road.
So tell us about some of those things. Like, what are you doing to incentivize supply, and like, how did that process work?
I mean, so number one, the key to the marketplace is to continue to grow supply all the time. So I don't even know if it was totally obvious at that point, but supply was the game, because if there's supply out there, people are going to ride. People always need a ride, and it was so cool and such a game changer that like virality starts to happen. Like, you're going to tell your friends about this experience. You're going to either ride with friends, or you're going to it's the game that starts to take place. So one of the things that you can do is you can incentivize referrals. And so we had a give-get program, give 10, get 10, give 20, get 20, give a ride, get a ride program. So that juices juices demand, juices referrals. But really, it's about, you've got cars on the road, you continue to grow supply, demand starts to come in, and then you're growing this referral, this sort of referral engine. And the other thing that we were doing was, if somebody couldn't get a ride for some reason, so we'd be looking all the time. Hey, somebody requested and couldn't ride, or somebody opened up the app and there was no cars around. I was sitting there literally sending emails to these folks all day. And so it was like, hey, so you tried to take a ride and you couldn't, here's $5. Really to kind of cap it off, it's like the baseline is supply and growing supply and ensuring supply is on the road. So incentives to drivers to make sure they're out there. And that makes also, you're not making money from this market yet. So over time, Uber is trying to condense the time from beta launch, and then profitability, or like theoretically profitability. And you're using those incentives at that point to just ensure that there's at least some cars on the road. And Saturday night, there's a bunch of cars on the road. And this is like pre-surge pricing and other things where, you're trying to build these markets up to a place where there is market, equilibrium, or whatever the word would be, of like, this thing's actually working, and it's working ongoing, and it's growing ongoing. But at this point, it's much more manual. Let's make sure there's cars on the road. Riders are sort of naturally using it. Let's incentivize them to tell their friends. Let's do a bunch of marketing campaigns to get them telling friends or get them activating. And then let's be great at customer support. Every ride is rated. Let's, follow up on every low rating. I mean, I'm sitting there all day. Somebody had a low rating ride. Hey, what happened? Let me know. Speaking to, Alan, hey, this happened in this car. Can we work on this quality thing? This person's tweeting about us. What's going on? Let me talk to them. This person opened up their app, couldn't get a ride. Let's contact them. And so, we're just sitting there all day managing supply and demand of this market. If you do that, then, for the most part, people are having positive experiences, because even if they have a negative experience, they're likely coming back. And again, the underpinning of this is there are cars on the road. Right. And so even though you have to pay for that early, it allows you to actually build the thing. And the different, there's a bunch of obviously things that were different about Uber, but one of them was, it was reliable. For the most part, open your phone and get a ride within 5 to 10 minutes. And there was no other thing that had existed before that where that was the case. And so these were different tactics that basically made that be a thing. And if for some reason we missed the mark, we tried to be on top of it.
Wow. I mean, the thing that blows my mind is how guerrilla it was, how grassroots it was, and that you were sitting there with 2, 3, 4, 5, and then obviously it grew to a lot more people managing, like one person managing social, giving that anecdotal feedback right away to the person that needs to know what all these different experiences are like. Same thing with managing a bad experience, same thing with incentivizing, same thing with, giving people calls. There's just so much to do when you're running the operations at a really early stage, it sounds like, for an Uber launch. So from that point, sorry, Max, if you want to say something.
No, you hit the nail on the head. and I think, what was cool about it was very entrepreneurial and scrappy. And so in a lot of ways, we owned our market, the P&L for that market, the supply and demand of that market. We owned the metrics for that market really more than anything. And then we had this so you owned kind of the local unit, and then you had some freedom to test and to do things at the local market.
That's cool.
And we were competitive with the other markets, but in a really positive way, in that we were still this deep camaraderie, because we were all still trying to work. One of the things I learned to do early on was that it really wasn't about me. It was about the mission of the company. It was about this big thing, and it really wasn't about any individual. And Travis wanted to change the world and saw the world in a certain way, and thought that the world should be that way. And so, whatever you want to say about that, I think it was clear that he thought the transportation and reliability and these things were something that people should have sort of, an unlimited access to and an unlimited right to. And again, there's obviously positives and negatives with individuals thinking that they can make the world a certain way, but that is sort of in my mind, the beauty of sort of, entrepreneurship and business building and capitalism, right? And some of the greatest innovations that we've ever seen are based on one person thinking that they can shape the world in a certain way. And some people have a crazy ability to get close to that. But it was very clear early on that we were all part of something that was bigger than ourselves. And I think that has stayed with me to this day. And so what then cascaded down was there was a culture that we were all in it together, and it wasn't about the individual. And so we would work hard at the local level, and we'd compete with each other, and it'd be like, how did Los Angeles onboard 20 SUVs these days, this week? Like, screw those guys. But also, like, how did you actually do it? And I want to beat you next week. And then they'd say, we did this, we rented out a hotel lobby thing and invited drivers there and put up a Craigslist post. We were like, of course, why didn't we think of that? We'd do it the next week, and we'd onboard 40 SUV drivers. Boston says we want to put ice cream trucks on the system. Genius. We want to do that. And then all of a sudden 6 cities have ice cream trucks on this system in a random Friday in July. Cool. And you're delivering ice cream. And so, there was this really interesting, push and pull that I definitely think came from, and in a lot of ways, this stuff came from a mix of Travis and Ryan Graves were very different people. And they had a really good yin and yang of just like that cascaded down that kind of created this sort of interesting petri dishes at the local level that, again, shared info, competed, and then, this thing just started to, kind of propel itself forward. I mean, we would literally have weekly calls where every city would have to show their numbers to every other city, and then account for why those numbers were that way, and had leaderboards and whatnot. And so, but it was in a positive way, and again, it's a really tough balance. And I think a lot of that stuff was lucky and natural and whatever else, but it was done in a way that was positive. It was not a shaming thing. It was, we got to bring everybody forward. And again, I mean, it worked.
I love it. I mean, the authenticity behind the authenticity that is necessary for that to work is probably something you identified with. So people that know you know that one of the things you're known for is being authentic. I mean, it's just really clear and apparent after you talk to you for 30 seconds. And especially that consistently over time. You must have identified with that in the authenticity that had to be, it was just necessary in order for that type of system to work, to have that pull and push and have it be healthy.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there was the early days, no bureaucracy, not a lot of ego. There was too much to do. It was too early. It was obvious there was product market fit, even though, probably half of us didn't even know what that was. But people were using this thing and it was growing. And again, it doesn't mean that every day was hard. The stuff was not easy, I think I answered like 20,000 sport tickets in my first year. There was not one day for a year that I didn't open up my laptop and answer, tickets and tweets and all these different things. But obviously, luckily you can do that and have it not be awesome too. So, I feel very lucky that, we put in that work, but it was something that, became really successful. And I definitely took from that it doesn't always end up that way. Yep. And, I think, and there was ups and downs too. So, again, this was not This was not easy. It was not all rosy by any means. But, I think it was, I think you just, those were elements that I definitely took from the whole experience.
Very cool. Maybe 2 or 3 more things. Can you talk about a typical launch plan that Uber goes through in order to launch a city?
I mean, it was some of the stuff I talked about. I mean,
and maybe how it looks different now versus the way it looked back then. Maybe that's a good place to start.
Now it's much more centralized generally. Right. So now there's less of a need for the local operations. I think the difference early on was you would actually drop somebody in, they would get to know the market. You had to know the regulations at a local level. You had to know lawyers at a local level. You had to know all the influencers and the people that made that city the city. You had to know what it was, the ethos of the city that made it the city. This was a local thing. Transportation was inherently local. It was drivers in a city. It was riders in the city. If you're launching in Oklahoma City, which, we had a woman who went down there and did that, and she was a rock star, Emily Wisloski. She was flying in there and living there for months and eating, sleeping, drinking, whatever else, like Oklahoma City. And, she had like Nick Collison, I think, who was on the Thunder at the time, like his Rider Zero. And, that was that. And so, you would drop somebody in and they would do all these things. And again, it was a similar sort of 4 to 8 week period ramp. You get to the market in a big way, and then you start to grow it, and you try and get a GM in place who's going to own it in perpetuity, and you get a couple other, leaders on the supply and demand side who they're going to own it in perpetuity. And so that was a bit of the launch plan. And then, that person would then jump to another market, and those launchers would do that for basically as long as they could, which was oftentimes like a year, before they were like, this is crazy. And then they would usually own a market after that. Okay. And so, we just had amazing people do that all over the world. I mean, we had a guy who did that in the Middle East, and he was like a guy from San Francisco, and ended up owning massive parts of the Middle East. And, it was like my age, and owned like, massive P&L. And, that was because people, strapped in a lot of ways and buckled down and did these kind of crazy things where they would go into these markets that they had no context on and figure out how to make it happen there. So that was the early days. So it was much more of the sort of local ethos. Now, as you fast forward, this thing's much more of a machine.
Right.
A lot of things have been centralized, as they should. Processes have been centralized. Technology has been centralized. Support centers have been centralized. The only way that you can have a system that now does, I have no idea what the numbers are now, but, I assume, definitely millions and millions of rides a week, right? If not day. You have to have a massive operations beast of a system that can actually do that.
Love it. Okay, cool. So you're